Right now, if you get lost, your phone fixes it in 3 seconds. A blue dot, a calm voice, a satellite quietly doing all the work so you never have to wonder where you are. Getting lost has basically become optional. Now picture the North Atlantic, 9th century. No compass, no map, because nobody has ever made one, because as far as anyone knows, nobody has ever come back to describe what's out there. Just gray water in every direction, a single square sail, and a man named Flóki Vilgerarsson standing at the bow about to do something almost no sailor in history had tried before. He was going to let birds choose his course, not out of desperation, on purpose, because in his world, a raven wasn't just a bird. It was a messenger sent by a god, and Flóki was betting his family's lives on the belief that the messenger would come back with the truth. Here's why that belief existed in the first place. Odin, the chief god of the Norse pantheon, the god of wisdom, war, and death, was said to keep 2 ravens perched on his shoulders, named Hugin and Munin, thought and memory. Every morning he sent them flying out across the entire world, and every evening they returned and whispered back everything they had seen and heard, so that even sitting on his throne, Odin knew what was happening in every corner of the earth. Because of that one belief, a raven was never just an animal to the Norse. Spotting one before a raid, a voyage, or a battle was never a neutral moment. It meant something was watching. It meant Odin's attention had landed on you, for better or worse, and you were about to find out which. So when Flóki set out to find land that might not even exist, he didn't bring a compass. He brought 3 ravens. He was chasing rumors, secondhand at that. A sailor named Geir Svavarson had drifted around a large landmass a few years earlier. Before him, a Viking named Nadad had been blown off course and glimpsed the same coastline by accident. Both men had seen it. Neither had gone looking for it on purpose. Flóki was about to become the first person in history to sail toward that unconfirmed land intentionally, with his crew and his own family aboard, on the strength of stories other sailors had brought home half-drowned. The method was simple, because it had to be. Once Flóki judged the ship had sailed far enough that land, if it existed, should be somewhere within reach, he released the first raven and watched. It climbed, circled, and turned straight back the way they'd come, flying for the Faroe Islands they'd already left behind. Nothing new out there yet. He pressed on. Later, he released the second raven. It climbed, circled the ship as if searching, found nothing worth committing to, and dropped back down onto the deck. Of the 3 signs, that one might be the most unsettling. No land close enough in any direction for a bird to bother reaching for it. Somewhere in the middle of the North Atlantic, food running low, no way to call for help. That is about as alone as a group of people can be. Then he released the third raven. This one didn't circle. It climbed once, oriented itself, and flew straight out over the bow, northwest, until it vanished from sight completely. And it never came back. To Flóki, that could only mean one thing. The bird had found somewhere worth staying. He gave the order to follow its heading into open water, chasing a bird nobody could see anymore. Days later, jagged coastline broke through the mist exactly where it had gone. Black volcanic rock and glaciers rising out of the sea. Iceland. Flóki went home with a new name stitched to his own for the rest of his life. Hrafna Flóki, Raven Flóki. The story doesn't end with him. Decades later, on battlefields instead of open ocean, Viking warbands started carrying a raven of their own, woven instead of feathered, believed to carry the exact same gift for foresight Flóki had trusted at sea. It was called the Hrafnsmerki, the Raven Banner, a triangular flag stitched with a black raven in flight, carried at the front of the army. According to the sagas, and according to the chronicles of the very people the Vikings were fighting, this was never just decoration. It was read like an oracle. In the moments before a fight, warriors watched the cloth. If the raven flapped and strained against the pole, wings spread against the wind, that was Odin's promise that victory was coming. If it hung still and limp, no motion at all, that was a warning that the battle ahead was already lost. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle itself records a raven banner carried by the great heathen army, proof that even the English scribes writing about the men terrorizing their coastline took the symbol seriously enough to name it in their own histories. But the Raven Banner doesn't tell a clean story of the omen always paying off, and that's exactly what makes it worth knowing. In the year 878, at the Battle of Sinwyd in Devon, a Viking leader named Ubba carried the banner into battle against the forces of Wessex, trusting whatever the wind was doing to that flag. The Saxons launched a surprise attack. Ubba was killed. The banner was captured outright, a public, humiliating failure of the very omen it was supposed to guarantee. Over a century later, at the Battle of Clontarf in 1014, an Orkney earl named Sigurd the Stout carried a raven banner said to have been woven by his own sorceress mother, who wove a curse into the cloth alongside the blessing. Victory for the army behind it, death for whoever carried it. According to the saga, standard-bearer after standard-bearer fell holding it that day, until Sigurd, out of men willing to touch it, wrapped the pole around his own body and carried it himself. He died on the field before the battle ended. The prophecy, in its own grim way, held. Step back for a second, because the birds at sea and the bird on the battlefield are really the same belief wearing two different coats. Releasing a raven to search for land you can't see, and watching a woven raven for a sign of what's about to happen, are both the same move. Reaching for a kind of sight no human eye has, and trusting it because it was believed to come from somewhere older and wiser than any one sailor or warrior standing on the deck or the field. A raven could fly further than a lookout could see, sense a shift in weather before anyone felt it, and in the Norse mind, carry a god's own knowledge back to whoever was watching for it. It's worth being honest about where these stories come from, too. Flóki's 3 ravens are recorded in the Landnámabók, compiled roughly 300 years after his voyage supposedly happened, built on oral tradition passed down for generations before it reached parchment. The raven banner has a slightly stronger paper trail, since 9th century English chroniclers, writing about the enemy attacking them in real time, mention it directly. But the detail everyone remembers, that the woven wings genuinely seem to move with the outcome of the coming battle, comes from the sagas, written centuries later by descendants proud of the story. None of that requires the tales to be literal fact to explain why they mattered. A sailor nicknamed after ravens for the rest of his life, and a battle standard famous enough for the enemy to record capturing it. Both suggest something real happened. The supernatural polish almost certainly came after, the way it always does. So here's the full shape of it. 2 ravens sat on a god's shoulders and flew the whole world every day, seeing and hearing everything, so that nothing on earth escaped his notice. A sailor took that belief onto a wooden ship and released 3 birds into open ocean, one at a time, following the one that never came back all the way to an island still lived on today. And generations of warriors after him carried a version of the same god onto the battlefield, woven into cloth instead of flying free, watching its wings for a sign before every fight, sometimes rewarded, sometimes, as at Sinwit, betrayed by the very omen they trusted. And that blue dot on your phone, updating itself without you ever having to think about it, exists because human beings eventually stopped needing to trust a bird with their lives. We built the satellites so nobody ever again has to stand on the deck of a small wooden ship in the middle of an empty ocean, release the last animal they're willing to risk, and simply watch the sky to see if it comes back. Flóki never had that certainty. He had a raven, a direction, and the nerve to follow it into water nobody he knew had ever sailed and lived to describe. That's the whole story. Not a man who found an island. A man who trusted something wilder and more capable than himself, when everything human he had was no longer enough to find the way.